You are looking live right now at the hospital that is receiving those patients. Once again, at least 5 people injured and a shooter apprehended following an attack at Fort Stewart in Georgia. I want to bring in CBS News correspondent Shanelle Kaul, watching this story and the developments closely. So, Shanelle, we just heard from those local viewers what's happening there. It sounded like in some of the initial reports that the threat was neutralized, but then you see that sharpshooter right there with his gun aimed right there on the hood of his military vehicle. Are we to assume that that base is just on high alert protection on the outside and that that gun is pointed just to keep the public out?
Yeah, I mean, look, this looks like terrifying moments at the Fort Stewart Army base, Reed, and still so many questions about exactly how this happened and who is involved here. But the base right now is saying at least 5 of its soldiers were shot. Again, we don't know their conditions at this point, but I can tell you those soldiers, Reed, were treated on site, and then they were moved to Wynn Army Community Hospital for further treatment. I think we just had that shot up for our viewers before we came to me. We can also report this hour, Reed, that the active shooter has been apprehended and the lockdown has been lifted on the main part of the base just over an hour and a half after the lockdown was installed. We're also, important to mention, told that there is no current threat to public safety. Let's just remind everybody how this played out and how we got here, right, Reed? Law enforcement was dispatched for a possible shooting. This happened in the 2nd Armored Brigade Combat Team area just before 11 o'clock. It happened at 10:56 a.m. This is important to mention because, Reed, this team is known as the Spartans. This brigade is recognized as the Army's most modernized and lethal unit. The Army had advised people who were on the base at that time to stay inside. They put out this message on social media, on Facebook, saying close your doors, lock your windows and doors before the shooter was apprehended at about 11:35 a.m. Now, by 12:10 p.m., Fort Stewart had lifted the lockdown of the main containment area. But again, the 2nd ABCT complex is still locked down for now. Just moments ago, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had said, look, the president has been briefed on this and the White House is now closely monitoring the situation. And this will and continue to be a huge investigation, Reed. We're seeing multiple law enforcement agencies now working together on this, including, of course, Georgia State Police, but also the FBI's Atlanta office and the ATF is assisting. We also know, Reed, this has had a ripple effect in the community, right? There are 3 elementary schools that are actually on this base. All 3 were in lockdown. I can tell you now those lockdowns have been lifted. The superintendent saying in a statement, there is no immediate threat to schools at this time. And I also want to mention this is such a huge base. It's the biggest east of the Mississippi River with over 10,000 people who live there. That includes not just soldiers, but also family members, Army civilian employees, and it's about 40 miles southwest of Savannah, which is why it took our crews a second to sort of get there and bring us those images. I just want to ask our control room if we have an image of the front door of that military base. I know we've been going to that, which sort of shows the military scene on the ground there. And I was doing some digging here, Reed, just to get some perspective on this. The last mass shooting at a military base was in 2019 at Pensacola, Florida, where 3 people were killed. But again, we know 5 soldiers were shot here today at Fort Stewart Army Base, and we will continue to bring you the latest here on CBS News 24/7.
Shanelle Kaul, thank you so much for that update. Let's go back to Anna Schecter. And Anna, as we think about and project ourselves into that tense moment after the bullets flew, my friend, you've got to think how frustrating it is for these soldiers, because according to WTOC's reporting there in Savannah, they were going to take 2 of the more critically wounded soldiers by helicopter, but then weather mandated that they have to be driven that 45 minutes that Shanelle just mentioned. That has got to be tense.
That's exactly right. But luckily they were in a place where you have trained medical personnel who can initially administer, for example, put on a tourniquet if needed. I mean, these are highly specialized units. I mean, even their fellow soldiers would have been able to step in and help initially stop bleeding and the like. But it sounds to me from our affiliates reporting that at least 2 people are bound for a trauma center for more critical care. And that was delayed, their transportation was delayed. So yes, Very frustrating, of course. And also, we'll see if the suspect was one of their own, was a member of the team or somebody who worked there on the base. As you mentioned earlier, you need to have a security clearance to actually even enter on base. So right now the suspect is in custody. Investigators, they always want to be able to interview the person immediately, one-on-one, to try to piece together the timeline of exactly what led up, and of course to rule out if anyone else knew of or supported the attack. I mean, that is kind of the number one immediate goal, because they want to mitigate any other threat. And they also want to interview anyone who might have had any information that this attack was coming. Very important first steps in this investigative process. And of course, all of that information is going to be meticulously gathered and preserved, because this will be part of the story as a case goes forward, eventually as a prosecutor brings a case. So right now, these are very key minutes, hours unfolding right now in the investigative process, Reed.
Well, and Anna, it occurs to me as we try to deduce what the profile of that alleged shooter is. This was somebody who at a minimum was able to get proximity to some highly specialized, highly trained military personnel. You just heard Shanelle really characterize them as being elite. Characterize for
That's
us
right.
anybody in the proximity of them or anybody who would be training with them. They've been in the military for quite some time, no?
For sure. This unit, as Shanelle was saying, highly specialized, trained for combat. This is the milieu that we're talking about, and these are also the victims, the 5 soldiers who were shot. Were a part of this. So potentially the suspect was highly trained and had access to weapons. So we're waiting to hear. Obviously, the investigators now have determined themselves an identification, and they're going to want to go and search, obtain electronic devices. They're going to want to look for other weapons that might have been stockpiled. They're going to want to look for motive, of course. Look for if they were influenced online, if it was a personal grievance. I mean, they're going to chase down everything, and there are so many different investigative avenues that they're going to be going down simultaneously, and that has already kicked in. That is already underway.
Anna Schecter, thank you so much. And of course, our hearts with the families who are attached to those 5 soldiers who have been injured in that shooting.